Dentistry in General Radio Network presents the Independent Dental Practice Podcast with Dr. Sonny Spera.
Today's episode is brought to you by Kettenbach Dental. For over 75 years, Kettenbach has been revolutionizing dentistry with innovative materials, impression materials, composites, cements, and more. Elevate your practice with products you can trust at kettenbach.com.
In this episode,
I just hope that someday that someone will say, hey, you know what? I used to talk to Sonny. He used to help me out with this. And then they find another dentist in their dental society or at their meetings and say, hey, you sit down, have lunch with them. How's it going? And someone starts opening up to them. They remember where they were. Because I remember where I was. I remember buying that practice in October 1, 1991. I wasn't feeling too confident. I was like, okay, I'm jumping in the ocean. So I think the mission is quite clear. And that's why I want to be part of your radio network, is because I want to help dentists out there.
Building Independence, Mastering Dentistry, Growth, and Mentorship. Dr. Sonny Spera interviews Dr. Bob D.
All right. Hey, everybody. Glad to be back. Dr. Sonny Spera, our guest on the Independent Dental Practice. Episode numero uno. It's Dr. Bob D, and we're happy to have him. Hello, Bob.
Hello, Sonny. Thank you for having me.
That was your smooth and sultry voice, huh?
All
right.
I'm practicing on this new microphone, but we've been wanting to do this for how long now? Probably about a year.
And now we drive everybody around us crazy, right? Because we want it to be really good and just so, and I want it to cover a lot of different things. And, finding the name was the first step, right? So I want to respect where I came from. So, but I also want to really hit what I feel is my sweet spot, and that's the independent dental practice. And the model, which I'm a big fan of, is the out-of-network model, or the truly independent, right? Independent from insurance. But we could also interpret independent as independent from corporate or independent from Big Brother. We know, Bob, you're a big proponent, and you run a practice that's a PPO practice or a insurance-dependent practice, and very successful, and as I think we are. I think there's room for everybody. I don't think there's one model, but both you and I think have a tendency towards each. Why don't you talk a little bit about how you got into the model you got into? Did you start with it right off the bat?
Yeah, to be honest with you, you say I'm successful. I don't know how to define success, right? Some people define success by the amount of time they have that they spend with their family. Some people define success by the type of car they drive. Some people define it by the type of fountain pen they have, right?
We know you love fountain pens.
I define success as happiness, right? And that's a general term. I know, and it's a cliche, but if you're happy doing dentistry, that is success to me. Do I make as much money as fee-for-service dentists? No. But I run a PPO practice, and this is the key thing, Sonny. This is what I want PPO doctors to think, right? I run a PPO practice like a fee-for-service practice. We do everything for our patients. And people think that we don't have to do that, but yes, you do, because there are more PPO doctors that you're competing with that fee-for-service. They're going to walk into next door if you're not treating them well. We are very much aligned. It's just I don't make as much money.
But here, I think that's a misnomer, though. I don't think by being a, quote, fee-for-service practice, because I still have a different definition, but we'll call out-of-network and fee-for-service equal for this discussion. Right. That it doesn't mean that person is making a ton of money. Really, it really shouldn't. What it should mean is that person is not restricted or abiding by what insurance codes or insurance companies have determined are their set of rules. And that's really it. So that person could make $100,000 and they could be perfectly happy. So it's not, to me, that I think that's a misnomer that, the fee-for-service practice makes so much more money. I think the groundwork is there if that person wants to. Now, I still think you have to pay attention to efficiencies. I think that's something that we try to do in our practice.
Right.
And so there's a lot of similarities because you only have so much time. So my opinion, when I'm in the office, I want to work. I want to treat patients. I want to do my best. And when I leave, I want out. So I want to be able to leave that there so I can enjoy my many other interests outside of the office. Like you said, the happiness quotient, right? Are
Right.
you able to spend time doing the things that you put a high net value on? And I'd
Right.
like to think I'm able to.
Yeah, I agree with you. Maybe it seems like I'm working a little bit harder than a fee for service. And why do I do that? Is that I would like to be fee for service or out of network. It's just a matter of competition, business model. There's a lot of factors involved. But yeah, I totally agree with that. And I want people to understand who Sonny is. I don't know if many people know that you own multiple offices and you are not a DSO. And the
Right.
way you run it should be a model. Tell me a little about that. Now I'm turning the mic around. I'm interviewing you.
That's okay. We're good. So for me, like our growth, I'm going to say partially was accidental, but it certainly was a little bit of opportunistic. When things came along, when practices came up for sale, and they were, I still consider them, at least certainly colleagues of mine, I consider them friends of mine, contacted me and said, "Hey, why don't you look at my practice?" Especially those that were out of the area, right? That weren't right in our direct area. I started buying a practice from a guy who had an eye injury, and it was October 1, 1991. I'll never forget it. That was my first day as an independent practice owner. And there was a little 4-room dental office in the basement of a raised ranch. And that's how it started. And had a decent following that came with me from my associateships to this little small rural town outside of Binghamton, right? And Binghamton's, believe me, no metropolis, but it's a city for all intents and purposes. And we were out, it's certainly in a rural area or more rural.
Upstate New York.
Upstate New York, correct. And I was from on the other side of Binghamton. So this practice was east of Binghamton. I was from west of Binghamton. And there's about 7 or 8 miles radius outside of Binghamton, right? So it's about 15 miles from where I'm really from. So I had always thought I'd like to get something back closer to here. So I always kept my eyes and ears open. And then something came up, and then we made that happen. And I knew, okay, I'm going to have 2 offices. But I had to build the practice up to the point where I could bring somebody in. They could share the load, right? They weren't coming into nothing. They were coming into a very busy, very time-consuming practice that they could start and hit the ground running. Then would free up me a little bit to start to administer, but you had to be a little overstaffed, right? And along the way, you had to start thinking, okay, how do you do this? And Howard Ferrand always talked about franchises, McDonald's, and systems. So it really made you have to think in that terms. Listen, how are we doing this? How are we delivering our product? And can we do this here? So then the hard part was making the 2 identical, right? And then from there, it became, I'll say, a little bit easier because now you're able to do it. You can split yourself. And now you have to have resources. So you need an office manager. And then you need someone that can handle the books and someone that's doing this. So you start to move some different pieces around. But what you're doing right now, what I know is I was creating an organizational chart, right? And I was putting titles on people. And I despise that because of my dad's background was IBM and everybody had a title. Well, he was a manager. He was in charge of the brooms. This guy was this. I was like, oh, cow, man, who's in charge? And everybody seems to be a manager. So I learned. And he said, you're going to need this. And he was dead on. And this was 30 years ago. So as we grew, and then we added another practice, which was an hour away, that was a big step. And then at that point, I said to the docs that I was working with, anybody want to go in on this? Or does anybody want to do this? And in fact, the driving person behind it was my associate at the time, was my partner moving forward. Yeah, let's do this. So that kind of just enough to get me going to do that. So that's how we added it. And the thought really back then was, let's take this little small practice in this little small town. Let's build it. Let's grow it. Let's bring somebody in. Let's sell it to them. That just didn't work. It was very hard to find people that wanted to go to those areas and wanted to settle in those areas and wanted that. So then we're like, okay, so we were making it work. And then another practice came along, and that was very south of us in Pennsylvania, about 40 minutes south. So another kind of outlier. But both of these practices came from friends of mine that wanted to sell, were having trouble selling, or weren't really actively pushing to sell. And they basically talked us into doing it. And then the last practice, and then on that one, I had the same partner, wanted to do the same deal. We did that. And then the last one, I asked the same question to all the docs. And now I had 3 docs that wanted in. And then my son, who was an associate, wanted to buy in too. So that's where he bought into that practice. So we have 5 offices. There are 4 different business designations, and we have 3 or 4 different ownership structures, but we run it like it's one office. So it's complicated, and part of it is stupid because it would be much easier to put it underneath one roof, right? Be so much easier. However, I've never been the brightest guy in the room. So this is how we developed it, and this is how we grew it. And now I turned 61 this year. I still feel pretty young. I don't plan on retiring anytime soon, but that thought does get into your mind. At what point am I going to be doing something? So what I did this past year was try to take off either a week or a very long weekend every month and see how it went. And it went pretty good. So I don't want to stop, but I do want to take a little more time to enjoy some of those things with the family and to travel maybe a little bit. And, you know, my passion, I love doing podcasts. I love speaking to dentists. I love dentistry, but I also love sports and basketball and coaching. I mean, coaching is probably my biggest passion now. And right now I'm not coaching a team, so I'm like a fish out of water. So
Right.
first time in 40 years, I don't have a team to coach. So
Yeah. I want to touch base on something you said. You're so humble that I'm talking this way, but that you said you're not a smart guy. But the way you have structured this practice, to me, it's structured to help the younger generation and to help the profession and not to hurt it. When you structure a 5 different office into these different businesses, now the partners can buy you out. There's this whole movement of dentists buying practices and putting it together. Oh, I'm going to sell it to a DSO, and I'm going to. DSOs are not going to buy 17 offices that are not showing profit. Everybody's got to be a little realistic about what these financial geniuses do to dental practice. And Sonny, what Sonny has done is created an out, right? Created something that he can retire and be happy about what he's done. Sonny, I'm a sports guy. You're a sports guy. When I first met you, I was so impressed. Oh my God, you played for Syracuse. So I have a huge sports background. You have a sports podcast that you do.
Yeah.
Tell me a little about that, because I want people to get to know who Sonny Spera is, other than the independent dental practice podcast.
Yeah. I played at Syracuse University from 81 to 85.
Wow. 4 years.
Yeah, 4 years. Yeah, that back then, most people played 4 years. So I played the same 4 years as Pat Ewing, Chris Mullins, Ed Pinckney. So those are a couple names. And when they talk to people, I'm sure they're talking about this Dennis in Binghamton as well. So let's equal time, right? So the Big East started, the very first year was 1980, right? 79, 80. So this was the third year, was my freshman year, was the third year the Big East was in existence. And the Big East went just bonkers, because in their third year of existence, they had a team playing for a national championship. That was Georgetown. 2 years later, Georgetown won the national championship. The year after that, Villanova won it. And there were 3 Big East teams in the Final Four, and it's never been done since. So the Big East really was a juggernaut, and it coincided with the beginning of ESPN. So they started to broadcast a lot of the Big East games. So ESPN needed content. Big East needed exposure. It was a perfect storm. So our podcast is called the Big East Rewind, and it really goes into, and we've interviewed everybody from the coaches, Jim Boeheim, Bill Raftery, Lou Carnesecca, PJ Carlissimo, Jim Calhoun, just a who's who of the coaches. And then the players, the people that we've spoken to. We've interviewed officials. We interviewed mascots. We interviewed cheerleaders. The media that we've interviewed, Jay Billis, Sean McDonough, Raftery counts, he's in there. John Feinstein, who's written books, and Bob Ryan, legendary Boston Globe writer, and Hoops Weiss in Philly. There's so many people that we now are friends with from this podcast, and it's been a labor of love. It truly has been a lot of fun to really dive into that, and then to be a part of it. Because you look back and you say to yourself, when you're a little college punk and you think you're the best thing in the world, and you're competing against Michael Jordan on the basketball court, and then he's selling Hanes underwear now, and you're filling teeth. And hey, listen, you had your chance, you did your thing, but I wasn't a superstar, right? I wasn't one of the starting 5. So you have a little bit of, I could have played more, I could have done this. But when you look back on it, you're like, man, I played with Pearl Washington. I played with Ronnie Cycli. I was on the court with Hakeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler, Michael Jordan, like legendary, Mark Price, John Sally. All these people, I was on the basketball court. This little kid from Endicott, New York, was on the court with some of the legends of the game. Pat Ewing, you could go on and on. It really is amazing. And so this is almost like a historical view, or we feel like we're becoming the league historians by the people that we're speaking to. It's just been so much fun.
This episode is sponsored by Kettenbach Dental, trusted by dental professionals for over 75 years. From precision impression materials to advanced composites, reliable cements, and cutting-edge fluoride varnishes, Kettenbach provides everything you need to deliver exceptional patient care. Their commitment to innovation and quality has made them a leader in dental materials. Visit kettenbach.com today to explore how Kettenbach can transform your practice.
Did you play with Chris Mullen?
Oh, Chris Mullen was same 4 years, yeah. And he was like a 6'5" white guy, like this 6'5" white guy. So we matched up pretty well. He had a little better career than I did. 2,000 points later, he did okay. But yeah, it was fun.
People who know me know I'm an immigrant. And when I first came to this country was in the early 80s. And the Golden State Warriors drafted Chris Mullen.
That's right.
I'm a huge Mullen fan. And then I became a Syracuse fan. So this is like a strange thing that we met. And when I first met you, I'm like, oh my God, yeah. That's the story of Sonny Spera that I'm impressed with. I also want to talk a little bit about what we're doing here. All right. We talk about fee for service, out of network, whatever. But Sonny and I have been talking about this idea for a little bit. And I never had the time. He never had the time. The story here goes that I want to bring podcasts to the masses. There are only 5% of dentists that are listening to podcasts. And there are a lot of podcasts out there. Our motto, Sonny and I have decided to be content first, no pitching of products. We're going to have guests that have products and things like that. But we want to be able to deliver quality content to you. And it's going to be different podcasters. It's going to be under the umbrella of Dentistry in General Radio Network. I'm going to have my own podcast. Sonny's going to have his podcast. And Sonny, tell me a little about your thoughts on this idea. I know we discussed it for a long time, but never got a chance to do it until recently.
I think the one thing that we decided on was our number one focus is how do we help dentists? Mm-hmm. How do we help the profession? The saying is you're going to go forward, bring somebody with you. That's your role. And I had plenty of doctors that helped me out along the way that were either mentors, they knew it or didn't know it, or people that I just idolized and just copied. Sincerest form of flattery, right? And I've always felt a strong desire to help. I know you do it too. And I have no problem with people contacting me. I put my cell phone and my personal email on every show. People want to contact me, tell me about the episode or content, or they just want to reach out. And there are people who take me up on it, and I have no problem with it. Dentists I'm looking at this practice. What do you think? I have this situation in my office. They don't have the network. I had some people that I could ask those questions to, and not everybody does. And maybe not everybody has the personality that is easy to communicate or reach out and say, I need help, right? Mm-hmm. And we can go even deeper into when it gets dark, when that dentist is feeling there is no other way out. That's the worst thing that can ever happen. And neither of us ever want to see that happen. So I think the mission is quite clear. And that's why I want to be part of your radio network, is because I want to help dentists out there. I love interviewing people. I love hearing their stories, good and bad. I love learning lessons from them, with them. I love being a part of that process and journey. And I love maintaining those relationships. To this day, text, email, conversations, phone calls, they become a deeper relationship. And I just hope that someday that someone will say, hey, you know what? I used to talk to Sonny. He used to help me out with this. And then they find another dentist in their dental society or at their meetings and say, hey, you sit down, have lunch with them. How's it going? And someone starts opening up to them. They remember where they were. Because I remember where I was. I remember buying that practice in October 1, 1991. I wasn't feeling too confident. I was like, okay, I'm jumping in the ocean. I think I can swim in the shallow end. Now we're going to be out here without floaties, without a life raft. And we're going to see how it goes, because I borrowed money from my father. I borrowed money from my father-in-law. We did everything we could to buy the practice, took the loan out from the bank. And it was the biggest, largest amount of money I'd ever seen in my life. And it was $250,000. I just remember it. And at the time when I first started, I made $30,000 in my first year in dentistry. By my second year, I did a little better, but I still wasn't flying. And here it was. Yeah, I'm hanging it out there. Now, I'm the type of personality, I do like to steer my own ship. And if I go down the toilet, I like to have my hand on the plunger. But it's the cold, hard reality when push comes to shove, the buck stops with you. And I know not everybody's wired for that. So along that road, one, you got to do some self-reflection, right? Is this something for you? Is this something you want to do? And then get help, right? Get some mentors, get some people you can really. Fortunately for me, I had my dad. So he had the IBM background. So he helped take over some of the bookkeeping responsibilities off of my plate. Because when I started, I had a son, and then I had a daughter who was born in May 1991 with major heart problems. She had major heart surgery. So here I am, and I'm doing all this in this year of 1991. And I'm saying to myself, how are we going to do this? But you figure it out. So at that time, I was working probably 40 hours in my office. I was working 15 hours at a nursing home nearby. And I was doing the books and the payroll and everything at home. So I was probably logging 100 hours a week easy on dentistry or dental related things. Ordering, you name it. It was all under my job title, really, right?
Yeah.
So you learn by fire, but you also are going to have questions. Like it's either you're going to call your accountant. I got to pay taxes. What am I doing with this? Where, oh, you got to do this. Triple right system. What's that? Oh, you got to make sure things balance every day. What are you balancing? Right? You might remember it, but yeah, it was triple right. So you had a super bill on top and you wrote it, and then you had the day sheet and you had to have it, the totals had to equal and your deposit, all the numbers had to match, right? And you still got to do the dentistry, and you still got to take the face slapping a couple times a day, right? Where you're getting a shot here and a shot there, right?
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I want to touch base on this a little bit. That I just read a post our mutual friend, Dr. Paul Goodman posted that him and I debate this fact that most dentists enter dental school wanting to own their own practice. Now, that can change by the last year. That can change a couple of years after you're out and you want to be an employee. But even then, the majority of dentists in this country want to own their own practice. They're entrepreneurs. Now,
you think that, or is that fact? Are you stating that's your feeling, or that's fact?
Okay, when I see a new grad stays with a corporate office for an average of 18 months, where are they going? They all want to go work for a private practice, and at some point they're going to buy their own or do a startup, right? Do I call these things fact? No, I call it common sense, right? Talk to the young people. How many people do you know that are going to enter dental school and say, oh my God, I'm going to be an employee for the rest of my life? That's awesome. We go in there because of independence, right? We want to be an independent business owner. Now, again, as I said, you can do things. Now I'm going to get a little emotional here, right? You're going to do things to the environment to force these people feel the pressure to become the employee. That is what is happening, right?
But I think you're discounting one thing. Because I go, and I will tell you this, I still go out and I still talk at my dental school every single year for the last 20 plus years. And I speak on practice management, or I speak on basically what happens outside these four walls, right? Real world stuff. And I tell them, listen, I'm not inside these four walls. They don't pay me a nickel. And I'm going to say things that I really don't care if it agrees with anybody else, because I can say it. I'm not going to be giving you the standard corporate lines, right? I do see that there are some people that are going into dentistry as a part-time career. There are people that are going thinking, you know what? This will be a great job for me. I can have children, or I can be a father, whatever it is. I can have this, and I don't really want any of the other stuff. So that I see is different. When I went to dental school, 1000% agree. The majority of people were like, that's what their hopes and dreams and ambitions. The second part of that, I think, is where we're failing a little bit on the education model is we are pounding it into them that they have to go work corporate. That's going to be their only choice. And it's so funny because I gave one of the parts of the lecture I talk about is, okay, here's I'll give you the example. Two surface fillings, one crown, one extraction, right? And you do 4 hygiene checks. So you think people here, can you guys do that in a morning, a 4-hour day? Do you think that's reasonable? And everybody agreed, yeah, it's fine. So then I put pricings and I said, okay, in a out-of-network practice, this will be your fees, ballpark, and this will be what you'll get. Now, if it's PPO with a 30 or 40% reduction, these will be your fees, and this is what you'll get, right? So in both models, in the private out-of-network one, your make would be almost $1,000 for the morning. In the PPO was close to about $500 or $600. And your practical responsibility is daily, you got to make about $1,000 a day. So I'm saying, do you think you can make this happen in these practices? And remember, this is a half day. That doesn't even count your second half of your day. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Everybody agrees. Everybody gets it. 10 minutes later, first question comes up. I know when I graduate, the first thing I'm going to have to work for a DSO for a while. And I was like, did you see the example I just put up for there? You don't absolutely have to. But even with a financial burden of a $300,000 debt, which at the time was average, I know that's higher now, but those were the numbers. I was trying to give them real numbers, real life examples, right? But my point is there's a systematic, almost brainwashing, right? And you and I both know the amount of money that's now going into the dental schools from corporate sponsorships, from companies, from insurance companies, from DSOs, Heartlands, and all these different entities are created because that's their breeding ground, right? That's what they want those people working for them. So I think that part is hurt, that mentality. And those are parts of the equation that in that 4 years, if you're dental school and your professors are not successful as dentists, what are they going to tell you? I couldn't make it. You know, that becomes some of your examples. They need more exposure to people in the real world who are doing it and are doing okay.
Right.
That's my biggest role. That's what I'm trying to do. You know?
Yeah, and we're producing 40% more dentists than we did 10 years ago, even
That's for sure.
12 years ago, right?
Supply is way up.
And the excuse is so ridiculous, Sonny, that they say the same thing you said. They say that some of them are going to work part-time. But listen, nobody works part-time forever. As these part-time workers come back to full-time, somebody else goes part-time. So we are producing 40% more, and they're not telling us. And when we produce 40% more, and we're not educating them properly, they can't come work for my private practice. So where do they go? DSOs become their residency program, which they're not teaching anything, right? They become soldiers in this war.
And that's where they're left a little bit to hung out to dry, where now all of a sudden, if they don't have a strong moral fiber and they don't have that person that when they're, you know, as well as I do, when your back gets pushed up against the wall and you got that patient in your face and they're like, "Ah, ah, ah, ah," and you're like, whatever to make them happy. And you're almost ready to do whatever. And then something, that little voice is telling you, no, doc, that's not the right thing. Like my son had a patient in today, new patient, emergency. We typically take a PA and a bite wing if a person points to a tooth that's a problem. We took one picture, one bite wing, and the patient had trouble with it. So we were going to then take the bite wing on the Panorex, which will give us the PA view to see the apex teeth and all that stuff. And no, I can't do that, won't do that. So they take it, and then she walks out of the office, felt that she was abused and everything else. So he was, hey, Dad, this happened. What do you think? And I'm like, oh, that kind of sucks. But you did the absolute right thing. Don't compromise your dentistry. Right? But can you imagine if you don't make that decision? Okay, fine. As soon as you do that, it becomes easier and easier to lie, cheat, steal, we'll call it, right? But it becomes easier and easier to cross that line again. And that was the one question I was going to talk to you about, is business or ethics, the ethical question. And it's going to be brought into the playing field because of the parameters of what you're practicing in.
I talk about this with other doctors and young people, and I think actually ethics come and play that much here. Why? Because I don't believe, and this is one of the pain points of PPO doctors that work hard, that they say like is going to change based on a business model. If I am working unethically under a PPO plan, if I go out on network, you think I'm going to become ethical? You know what I'm saying? Ethics,
right.
I
agree with that, but you got to at least recognize that when that person is pushed, right, is pushed to that limit, that breaking point, if they go south, right?
I don't think they would. I believe in the human. I believe in the human goodness. Okay, I believe that 95% of dentists will do the right thing when they're pushed, even when they're pushed. Like I talk to my associates and I tell them, I don't care how fast you do a crown. I don't care if you need to reschedule a 3-hour appointment because the patient is sick. Do the right thing. Okay. We'll figure it out at the end of the month or a quarter. If I need to pay you to pay your bills, sure. But I also believe we need to support the younger generation, right? If your son doesn't have you to bounce that idea today with you, he's going to go home and that's going to affect his psyche. So
Oh, yeah.
I don't think when they're pushed, they're going to do the wrong thing. I believe when they're pushed, it's going to affect their mental health. Right?
Well, I think it will for sure. There's no doubt about it, especially if they don't have that support system, those people
Right.
they can speak to, right, to bounce things off of. And sometimes, let's face it, when you deal with the public, it's dentistry, you own a grocery store, you work at McDonald's, it doesn't matter. When you deal with the public, sometimes people want a pound of flesh, and you just
Yeah.
happen to be the person that they want to take it from. And it's hard. It's hard. Like I saw a post the other day. What if the patient's, oh, I'm paying for that car, or I'm paying, if you go there, it's nice to pay for that. And you get it. And then there's some days where you're like, okay, here you work for IBM. Okay, great. I just bought a new IBM computer. So did that help buy your car? So in essence, yeah, but in essence, both are true, right? Yeah. But do you bring it up? To me, you can only bring it up if you say that in a kind of tongue-in-cheek way. Because if you bring it up, how about this? Forget about it. Now that person's danders up, their hairs on the back of their neck, they're ready. They're bloated for bear.
Yeah.
It's for me, it's usually a chuckle, but those things, they do get under people's skin at times. And there's a lot of times we have conversations with all our docs, and there's 7 of us now, and everybody has something or some situation that they want to talk about, and it's probably something one of us has been through before. So the answer is, I'm never going to be surprised again. Should be part of your vocabulary. I'm never surprised. Can't be. Things are going to come up. Things are going to happen. Right? Like the husband, the wife who took the husband passed away, took his upper denture, ground it down, made it her lower denture. There's people do these things in reality. You might see it.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what we do, is to try to pay it forward. That's the basic thing, that we're here to help young people. But yeah, I don't know who interviewed who, Sonny. Was this your podcast or was it my? I'm confused. But whatever it was, it's our Sonny and Bob episode. I actually want to not number. That's another thing I want to do with this radio station. There's no number. We're going to do the Sonny and Bob show, or the Sonny and whoever you interview, because I believe numbers become impersonal. I like it to be, you identify with the person. Go look for that person instead of look for the number.
I believe that people, the best part about the podcast, to be the podcast genre, is typically there's no set in stone time limit. Right. And if you have a question, and I like Howard Stern's ability to interview people and to go deeper in conversation. I don't like it when he goes off on his personal kind of tangents, but I do the fact that he gets people to talk very freely and openly, and it's a conversation, and you really feel like you're sitting there at a coffee shop, at a bar, at a ball game, having that conversation. And I want to create that environment for my guests. I want to be able to be interactive. It's not going to be scripted, that I can guarantee you. So it's going to be free flowing, and it's going to be back and forth. And that's why I think I've made so many great relationships in this business and in this profession, because there's just so many great people out there, and some are more comfortable speaking, and the ones that aren't take a little while. But as they warm up and they realize it's just 2 people talking, I think a lot of great information comes out of those moments. So I just been really very fortunate to even be here to do these, because it's been a lot of fun. I look forward to getting it going again, because I missed it. I missed those conversations.
That's awesome. It's your podcast. You want to take us to the end?
All right, folks. This is the conclusion of our inaugural episode with the great Bob D, the smooth and sultry voice, as you heard. And our content is all going to be freely open and discussed. And of course, we're always going to look for guests. Anybody that wants to come on, have a conversation, by all means. I like to focus on practices. I love to hear people's stories and how they got where they got. And I love to hear where they came from, because that's so important, I think, in how all of us got where we got. So the Independent Dental Practice, episode 1. Ciao.
Thank you for having me. Look for these episodes on the Dentistry in General Radio Network, which will be publicized everywhere, and where you find your podcasts. We still want to have those 5% to listen to us, but we're going to
click like, click subscribe, share it with your friends. You know how it goes.
Absolutely.
Leave a review.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Sonny.
Thank you.
Today's episode is brought to you by Kettenbach Dental. For over 75 years, Kettenbach has been revolutionizing dentistry with innovative materials. Impression materials, composites, cements, and more. Elevate your practice with products you can trust at kettenbach.com.
This has been a production of Dentistry in General Radio Network. Visit our website, dentistryingeneral.com, to join engaging clinical and business conversations, explore our dental podcasts, and stay updated on our upcoming live events.